Data centers are becoming a major topic daily here in Middle Tennessee, and now a new petition is drawing attention to a proposed facility near Fisk University. Our Joylyn Bukovac explains.
Many of the concerns people are raising pertain to things like energy usage, water consumption, noise, and how close they may be built to neighborhoods in this area. A petition opposing a proposed data center near Fisk University now has thousands of signatures. Meanwhile, another petition focused on concerns about data center development in residential areas has hundreds of signatures. Just last week, Metro Council members voted to move forward with Nashville's very first proposed data center zoning regulations. Now, this bill would establish rules governing where future facilities can be built and create buffer zones from homes, schools, daycares, parks, and churches. It would also include operational requirements related to water use, noise, and sustainability.
I'm not in support of these bills at this time, not because they're not needed. I think they are, but I do think that the upcoming bill gives us an opportunity, to Councilmember Evans' point, to have more robust conversation as a body.
And that's really where this discussion stands right now. Supporters of the proposed zoning regulations say that Nashville needs guardrails before more projects are proposed, while others want more conversations about what those regulations should look like. The proposal passed on its first of 3 readings just last week. This is something that Metro Council will continue discussing in the weeks to come before any regulations go into place. Reporting in Nashville, I'm Joylyn Bukovac, WSMV4.